The gravity hall didn't echo, it groaned. Every bolt, every beam, every breath inside it carried the sound of strain, as if the room itself resented what it was built to hold. The air was thick and slow, dragging light into soft warps that bent around the platform at its center. Even silence was heavy here. The instructors called it a classroom, but the cadets knew better. This was a temple to failure, a place built to remind them that no matter how far their species had come, gravity always won in the end. Rows of alien cadets stood along the polished steel walls, armor gleaming with condensed moisture. Their bodies twitched under the crushing field, some adjusted their breathing regulators, others dug their claws or talons into the deck for stability. You could tell the newcomers by how wide their eyes were. They weren't prepared for what 10,000 tons of pressure did to your thoughts, let alone your muscles. In the center of the hall sat the gravitic block, a dull mass of compressed alloy drawn from collapsed star cores. It didn't look impressive. It didn't need to. The weight of it bent the air, making the metal tiles beneath it shimmer and flex like rippling water. Around it, the floor was already scarred from attempts past the indents of claws, shattered exosuits, and even the faint outline of a Virelian psychic who'd fainted mid-lift. Every year, the Academy called this test the weight of worlds. Every year, no one passed. It wasn't about victory. It was about endurance, how long you could last before gravity reminded you who was in charge. Today, the hall waited for another lesson. The instructors stood along the elevated platform above, their visors glowing a faint blue as they scanned the gathered cadets. One voice, crisp, mechanical, cut through the haze. Standard calibration active. Begin when ready. A hiss of pressure filled the air as the first field activated. The gravity doubled. The cadets staggered as if invisible chains had coiled around them. Even watching from the stands made the spectators lean unconsciously forward, as if gravity reached out for them, too. Then the first Threxian stepped onto the platform. His exoskeleton gleamed gold in the dim light. He flexed his clawed fingers once, dropped into a stance, and gripped the alloy block with both hands. The hall fell silent, except for the low groan of metal and the steady, rising hum of a weight that refused to be moved. Zektol's dorsal plates cracked first. A thin fracture line raced down the armored ridge of his spine as he strained upward, legs shaking, breath rasping in his translator collar. He let out a bellow, deep, guttural, and heaved. The gravitic block didn't budge. His arms began to fold inward, not from weakness, but compression. The density of the field was beginning to affect his own bone structure, pressing joints in ways nature never intended. He gasped again, dropped to one knee, and finally released his grip. Two medics moved quickly, assisting him back with a neutralizing pulse field that stabilized the worst of the structural microfractures. Zektol blinked at them once, nodded, and limped back to his place in line. Next came the Solarian twins. Bioluminescent and long-limbed, they glided onto the platform with the efficiency of synchronized swimmers. Each wore a high-density exosuit, titanium fibers, braided with biomechanical muscles. They approached the block in mirrored motion, latched onto opposite corners, and pulled. The suits held for 6 seconds. Then one of the left twin's stabilizers snapped in half with a sound like a muffled whip crack. Sparks burst from the elbow joint. A moment later, the right twin collapsed, writhing as the field pressure compressed the abdomen plate into the solar plexus. Pulse field now, someone shouted. The medics rushed in. One activated an emergency thoracic spreader and pried the chest plate off before it could collapse further. The twin was breathing, barely, with labored gasps and a pulsing vein across the left mandible ridge. The instructors made no comment. They never did during the test. Next came a Virelian. You could tell from the way the hall reacted, everyone shifted, some backed up. Virelians didn't lift with muscle, they lifted with mind. Yerix glided to the block, eyes glowing faint green. His feet never fully touched, the platform telekinetic field engaged, even as the gravity fought to bind him. He stopped inches from the alloy, extended both hands, and narrowed his eyes. The block shimmered. Not much, just a flicker, as though the photons around it hesitated. Then, Yerix screamed, not aloud, not fully. His body convulsed, every nerve in his frame firing at once. Blood burst from both nostrils, splashing onto the floor beneath him. He stumbled, tried to hold his posture, then dropped like a wire-cut puppet. His translator disc shattered as his jaw hit the tile. The medics ran faster this time. He needs cerebral decompression, now. Bleeding from the auditory canal. Get the neural stent. He tried to sync with the field. Idiot. They stabilized him after 12 minutes. He didn't regain consciousness. The instructor's voice echoed through the chamber again. Next. Silence. The remaining cadets stared forward, unmoving. A few exhaled. One dropped out entirely, stepping away and handing his participation disc to the nearest monitor. No shame, no laughter, just quiet defeat. Then a shape stepped forward from the end of the line. Not large. Not glowing. No armor. No exosuit. A human. He wore a standard-issue cadet's uniform navy blue, slightly worn, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. No biometric cuffs, no pressure suit. Just light gloves, calloused fingers, and a quiet expression that looked entirely out of place in the heaviest room in the galaxy. Whispers rippled through the crowd. A human? Primitive world species. No stabilizers? That's suicide. Is that even allowed? The instructor turned slightly, tilting his visor for a biometric read. Cadet Elias Grant, Earth Sector. Confirmation scan accepted. Proceed when ready. Another voice, one of the junior instructors, muttered under his breath. If he even touches it, I'll mark him as exceptional. The gravity field reset. The sensors recalibrated to max. And Elias stepped onto the platform. The air changed around him. It wasn't just visual, though. Yes, the light bent harder, shadows folded differently, and even time felt like it stumbled. No, this was deeper. The platform itself reacted. The moment Elias crossed the boundary line, the field sensors flickered. His heart rate, displayed above in real time on the upper observation deck, didn't spike. It slowed. Breathing even. Muscular tension, low baseline, stable. Neural response focused, not stressed. The instructors frowned. His body's adapting. In microbursts. Is that even possible without implants? No surge at all. He's not resisting the gravity. He's sinking to it. Elias didn't say anything as he approached the block. He just crouched. Fingers curled under the edge. One hand. No stance. No brace. He looked at the block like it was a stubborn backpack from a long hike. Then he smiled. Not wide. Not cocky. Just enough. And he whispered, "Baseline Earth gravity is higher. Let's see what you've got." The instructors leaned forward as one. Elias's body looked almost still beneath the suffocating weight of the gravity field, but the platform told a different story. It hummed in warning, a low, resonant vibration that spilled out into the air like a ripple across tense skin. Sensors registered stress buildup beneath the alloy. The block hadn't moved. Yet. Field readings are spiking, someone said from the control deck, recalibrating dampeners to compensate. Dampeners? The lead instructor snapped. He hasn't even started. Let the system ride. There was a reason they never calibrated the field this high without warning. The moment you reached full intensity, things failed, not just bodies, but the environment. Wires gave, foundations shifted. The air took longer to cross the room, but Elias didn't seem to notice. He shifted his weight slightly, a slow, careful lean into his right leg. Then his fingers curled tighter under the edge of the block. Not a full grip, just enough. The cadets held their breath. Some gripped their chest rigs, as if anchoring themselves in place would stop the atmosphere from falling with him. Then came the breath. Elias inhaled once, a deep, centered draw, then exhaled through his nose, calm, deliberate. His blood pressure just dropped, whispered one of the medical observers. What? Not by much, but it's not rising. He's stabilizing. It's as if the pressure is equalizing around him. That's not possible, said the Solarian commander. But then Elias pulled, with one hand. At first it didn't seem like anything had changed. The alloy mass didn't jump. There was no dramatic explosion of force, no roar, no cry. It just lifted. A centimeter. Enough. The platform groaned. Not in complaint, in warning. It began with a hairline fracture in the tile beneath his right foot. The super-dense polymer flooring, rated to withstand mechs and armored drills, cracked outward in a spiderweb ripple. The sensors blinked once, then again. Then they shorted. The gravitic block was rising. Every light in the chamber dimmed for a half-second. The emergency suppressors activated late, scrambling to rebalance the room's gravitational flux. Instead of stabilizing, they triggered a harmonic collapse in the pressure field, which amplified the mass's resonance. The weight didn't drop, it hovered, just a fraction higher. The chamber's auxiliary AI flagged an emergency override. Field overload imminent. But no one moved. Not even the instructors. Not even the medics. Everyone was staring at the block, suspended by a single human arm, trembling in the light like a thing unsure of its own density. Then came the second crack. The air. It collapsed. A vacuum-like pop echoed from the platform as the pressure differential around Elias inverted. The room buckled. Cadets staggered. Panels above the observation deck flashed red, indicating that the field had passed the 1.6 black hole threshold, a limit designed only for testing inanimate materials. And still, Elias stood. His face tightened slightly, jaw clenched, but not in agony. In control. Every muscle along his arm engaged in perfect rhythm. Ligaments coiled like suspension cables. There was no shaking. No panic. Just purpose. He turned his head slowly toward the instructor stand. "Exceptional enough?" he asked quietly. The lead instructor didn't answer. He couldn't. The mic had shorted from the power feedback. The block was set down with a soundless thud. No quake, no boom, just gravity reclaiming what it had borrowed for the briefest instant. Elias stepped back, his right hand opened, fingers slow to uncurl, but functional. He rolled his wrist once, then twice, his shoulder lifted and fell. Breath controlled. Sensors came back online seconds later. Vitals, 76 BPM, no blood oxygen loss, minor muscular swelling in the anterior deltoid, no tears, no ligament damage, skin temperature within resting norm. Core temperature, increased by 0.3 degrees Celsius, no cardiovascular strain. The medical staff blinked. One of them quietly said, "That shouldn't be physically possible. The force vector alone should have snapped the wrist joint under sheer load." "Earth standard muscle composition shows average fiber density," said another, scrolling quickly through Elias's personnel chart. "But tensile resilience is 340% above projection? Is that an error?" "No, it's adaptation. It's not strength. It's the way he distributes it." After a minute, the lights recalibrated. The platform shut down. The gravitic block sat in place, steaming slightly, and very, very still. No one moved to lift it again. Not because the test was over, but because it no longer meant anything. Zek Toll, the Threxian, watched Elias step off the dais and walk back toward the cadet line with slow, even steps. He didn't stagger. He didn't limp. He moved like someone accustomed to weight. The Solarian twins said nothing. One adjusted the strap of her chest plate and avoided eye contact. The Varelians remained silent, the conscious one watching Elias with wide, unblinking eyes. As Elias reached his position in line, a small cough escaped the cadet next to him, a feathery Avenari with 6 fingers and triple lungs. Elias turned slightly. "You okay?" The cadet blinked. "You didn't? Strain?" Elias shrugged. "Oh," I strained. "Your hand. It'll swell up, nothing torn." He looked up at the ceiling, then smiled. "Back home, you strain every day just walking uphill." Above, the instructor finally found his voice. How are you still standing?" Elias glanced upward, then flexed his hand once. "You built your machines to simulate pressure," he said. "But Earth doesn't simulate it, it just gives it to you." He pointed at the gravitic block. "You made a challenge to prove nothing could win against gravity, but that's where I'm from." The silence in the room became a second kind of weight, not crushing, but humbling. "You grew up resisting it," Elias continued. "We were shaped by it." Later that day, the computer logs were reviewed by Academy Control. What they found was stranger than expected. At minute 4 of the trial, the gravitic field had spontaneously increased by 20%, not from the instructors, but from the machine's adaptive core. It had responded to Elias's exertion the only way it knew how, by growing stronger. And he had kept lifting. When the instructors met in the private review chamber, they sat in silence for a long time. The lead evaluator, a Morlathi with 4 hearts and a low tolerance for metaphor, stared at the final footage on loop. "I don't think he lifted against the field," he said finally. One of the others turned. "What do you mean?" "I mean it stopped fighting him." Within a week, the test protocols were rewritten. The gravitic block was retired from active use. Instead, it was mounted in the central wing of the Academy's Hall of Record, no longer a tool for failure, but a monument. Below it, a new inscription was etched into the alloy plate: "To those born under heavier skies." And beside it, in smaller print, translated into every dialect of the known galaxy, "The weight was never the enemy." The Academy physicians didn't trust the results. After the test, Elias was required to report to Med-Sector 7 for full post-strain evaluation. No one walked away from a gravitic lift at that magnitude without microfractures, organ bruising, or neurological stress. Even the viewers sometimes needed monitoring. He arrived 20 minutes after the event, walking under his own power, wearing the same uniform and gloves. His gait was stable, no limp, no irregular rhythm. The only noticeable difference was a faint line of sweat along his hairline and a slightly swollen wrist. Right side. Dr. Harin met him at the threshold of the diagnostic chamber, frowning over the scan pad. "You should be horizontal," she said without greeting. "I'm fine," Elias replied. She snorted once and waved him inside. They always say that before the scanners light up like a warship. The scan suite was already prepped, lead-lined. 4 separate resonance imagers tracked bone density, vascular compression, and skeletal cohesion. Medrones hovered quietly nearby, ready with nanofixers in case something tore or gave out during the check. "Shirt off," Harin said, pulling up the control board. "We're going deep. Sit, and don't lie to me." Elias peeled his uniform down to the waist. His chest was broad, scarred lightly in 2 places, one from a blade, one from a burn. Both healed long ago. His arms were tense but not trembling. His lungs expanded with the regularity of someone in a low-pressure room. Harin glanced at the live scan as he sat. "You're not in pain?" "Muscle soreness, no tearing. Right wrist might have stressed the tendons." "We'll see." The first sweep began. Low-frequency pulses scanned his spine, moving from atlas to sacrum, measuring vertebral alignment and any sign of axial displacement. None. "Strange," Harin muttered. The second scan traced the vascular response during the lift, reconstructed from the post-event telemetry. It showed no cardiovascular overload, no spikes in lactic acid beyond normal physical stress, no internal bleeding. She stared. Then came the bone density map, and that's where everything changed. "Your cortical bone layer is over twice the thickness of any other species in your class." Elias raised an eyebrow. "That's normal for Earth baseline. We evolved in high gravity." She tapped the overlay on her screen. "This isn't evolution. This is adaptation within a single generation. You weren't born on a high-grav colony. Your records say you're Earth-bound, surface raised." "Correct." "Then these results don't make sense. Your trabecular lattice, the spongy inner core of your bones, has stress-fracturing patterns, like someone who's been lifting mass loads daily since childhood." "I have. Not simulated weight, real mass, full resistance." Elias nodded once. 5th-generation mining family, Appalachian region. Gravity never shuts off underground. You carry your load or you get crushed by it. She looked up. For a moment, she studied his face, as if the history in his bones was something she could see written across his jawline. "You were conditioned by your own planet. I was shaped by it." That word again. Shaped. Not made strong, not evolved. Shaped. As though the Earth had taken his body in its grip and forged it the way tectonic plates did mountains. The Academy's medical board called for a full report. By then, rumors had spread beyond the gravity hall. Recordings of the event leaked, first through the Cadet network, then through faculty sub-channels. It made it to a military broadcast on a Solarian combat cruiser within 30 hours. No exaggeration. No glamour. Just raw footage of a human lifting a gravitic block under conditions designed to break reinforced plating. The footage ended with him walking away. During the board hearing, Elias sat in a chair 2 sizes too small, arms crossed over his chest. In front of him, 11 senior officers, instructors, medics, and xenophysiologists debated the nature of his result. This was not a display of strength. It was something else. A neural trick. He's not augmented, no spinal shunts, no artificial tendons. Then is it training? Some form of resistance ritual? His ancestors built their endurance over millennia. He just inherited the strain. Still doesn't explain why he didn't tear a muscle or burst a vessel. Perhaps we've misunderstood what human adaptation is. Elias cleared his throat. They looked at him. Permission to speak? The lead instructor nodded. Elias leaned forward slightly. You're asking the wrong question. And what should we be asking, Cadet Grant? He looked them all in the eye, one by one. You want to know why I lifted that block? You're trying to figure out if I'm stronger than the rest. I'm not. One of the medics raised an eyebrow. Then explained the result. Elias tapped his sternum. I didn't lift against the weight. I let it show me where I was weak. Then I pushed through that. I didn't overpower gravity. I understood it. The officers said nothing. He continued. I grew up in a place where the mountain tries to bury you if you don't respect it. Where water carves through stone, not by force, but by patience. Where the planet doesn't care if you're tired. You move. Or it crushes you. He stood. And for the first time in that sterile, polished chamber, the board didn't see a cadet. They saw a survivor of a world that had never once made room for comfort. The instructor who had overseen the test met Elias outside the chamber. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, he asked, "Why did you volunteer to go last?" Elias glanced sideways. Because the others deserved their shot. They're strong. Most of them are faster, smarter. They trained for this. And you didn't? Elias shrugged. I trained different. I wasn't taught to win. I was taught not to stop. The instructor looked at the grav rings on his left forearm, rank indicators for years served. No one's passed that test before, he said. We thought no one ever would. Elias offered a half smile. That's because it was built to teach failure, not persistence. Then he walked away. Later that week, the data logs were anonymized and shared with off-world research teams. One analyst, a biomechanist from the Venari Corps, submitted a controversial report. Human resilience cannot be measured in force, output, or muscle density. It exists in the spaces between systems, coordination, pacing, response to environmental threat. Their strength is not in resistance, but in adaptation through repetition. It is not about the body they are born with, but the one they are forced to build in order to live. The report was suppressed, but not before it was quoted across the cadet forums. The nickname came shortly after. Stoneblood. Not because his bones were denser, not because he lifted the weight, but because he walked through a chamber built to destroy egos and left his own behind. The academy changed after that. Not officially. The curriculum stayed the same. Schedules, drills, evaluations, all untouched on paper. But the cadets walked differently through the corridors now. They spoke in quieter tones when they passed Elias. Not out of reverence, but caution. As if he carried some elemental force with him, not because he was invincible, but because he wasn't pretending to be. No one challenged him. No one dared him to prove it again. He never spoke about the lift unless someone asked. And when they did, he always said the same thing. It's not about what you carry, it's how long you're willing to. The academy wasn't designed for rest. Every day brought another test: zero-G combat, vacuum maneuvers, language immersion, mental acuity under sleep deprivation, planetary simulations. But for Elias, gravity was still the only thing that felt familiar. Weight was honest, the rest just felt like distraction. The real problem started 2 weeks after the lift. He was in the deep pressure simulator, a tank used to replicate gas giant environments. The others were still suiting up when the alert came through. Virelian sector. Training facility Theta. Collapse. An untested gravitational chamber had malfunctioned, locking into runaway compression. 9 cadets were still inside. One of them was Threxian. The others included two Solarian twins and a Grian shapecaster whose skeleton wasn't designed for compression at all. They wouldn't last more than 4 minutes. There was no rescue protocol. Only one being had ever withstood pressure that high for longer than 2 minutes without critical failure. They didn't order him to go. They didn't need to. By the time the emergency transport landed at Facility Theta, Elias was already inside the evac rig, pulling on pressure-rated gloves and checking the tether harness. He declined the full exosuit. Said it would slow him down. Medical teams on-site objected. Cadet Grant, this isn't a controlled field, the inner chamber's oscillating at fracture point frequencies. If you enter, you might not come back. Elias adjusted his wrist seal. Then I'll make it quick. The chamber door was sealed by dual pulse locks. Beyond it, the field shimmered not visibly, but in the way sound stopped traveling through the air, like every frequency had been swallowed. The command tech hesitated at the control pad. 3 of them are already unconscious, she said. If you're going to move, move now. Elias exhaled once. Open the door. He didn't walk in. He dove. The moment the seal broke, the pressure hit like a wall crushing down with the weight of collapsing atmosphere. The entire world slowed. His bones groaned under the load, the cartilage in his knees and shoulders compressed so fast it burned. He kept moving. 20 meters in. The air felt like syrup. Every step took more effort than lifting the gravitic block had. But the difference was, this time, others were counting on him. He reached the first cadet, the Grian. Thin bones, dorsal ridge bleeding through the skin, still breathing. Elias didn't lift her like a rescue medic. He lifted her like someone who had spent his life hauling loads that couldn't be dropped. A clean motion, secure grip, back upright, let the hips carry. He moved her to the evac threshold and turned around. The second twin was conscious barely. The other was slumped over a cracked support beam. Field sparks licked off the walls. Elias hauled them both, one in each arm. At 10,000 microkilos of ambient pressure, by the time he reached the Threxian, pinned beneath a broken section of the wall, his pulse had slowed to 60 BPM, not out of fatigue, out of discipline. He squatted, braced, heaved. The wall moved. 3 centimeters, then 6. The Threxian's body spasmed as pressure eased off the lower thorax. Elias rolled him free, then lifted. It took him a full 30 seconds to reach the exit again. He didn't stagger, but his lips were bleeding from the inside, not a lot, enough to taste iron. As the medics took the last of the cadets, the pressure door hissed shut. Elias sat down beside the wall and let his shoulders relax. His vision flickered not from strain, but fluid compression behind the eyes. It was a known risk. Too much pressure, and the retinal vessels could swell. He blinked a few times. The lead medic crouched in front of him. "You're done," she said. "Everyone else?" "Stable. You got them all." He nodded. "Good." Then, at last, he laid back. They monitored him through the night. His blood pressure equalized within an hour. He refused sedation. He slept. The next morning, the Academy held a closed review. Facility Theta's gravitational field had surged due to a calibration error in the failsafe oscillator. The design flaw had gone unnoticed because no species on record had survived past the initial exposure to diagnose it. Elias had walked through it, twice, with others on his shoulders. No artificial brace, no biochemical boosters. Just a body designed by a world that never stopped pushing down. That week, cadets from across the outer stations started requesting reassignment to Earth sector physical conditioning modules. 2 Grians asked if they could visit. 1 Varelian began studying human spinal adaptation. By the end of the cycle, every instructor had signed the same memo. Human gravitational tolerance exceeds projection. Their limit is not dictated by physics, but by purpose. And yet, Elias still trained like before. No speeches. No exhibition matches, just one lift at a time, in silence. Someone once asked him, after a drill, what it felt like carrying that kind of pressure. He answered with a small shrug. You get used to it. Then he wrapped the weights back up and moved on. There was no ceremony. The Academy didn't hand out medals for endurance, no parades for surviving impossible weight. Even the facility repair crew that patched the cracked platform in the gravity hall didn't say much, just welded over the worst of the fractures and buffed the floor until the scars were no longer visible from a distance. But every cadet remembered exactly where they were the day Elias lifted the block. And every one of them remembered what came after, when he walked into a collapsing training chamber and carried 8 lives out of it, not because he was stronger than gravity, but because he never expected gravity to be fair. It was Earth's legacy, stamped into bone and breath and tendon. No announcement marked the day Elias completed his final exam. No lights flared, no banners dropped. But the instructors all stood when he left the chamber, and none of them sat down until he was gone. 3 weeks before graduation, a visiting delegation arrived from the Varelian Council, ambassadors, instructors, and high-order neuralists. They came bearing gifts and data requests, including a petition to study Earth-born cadets in long-duration compression environments. They requested an audience with Elias. He agreed, but only under one condition. "No labs," he said. "We meet where I train." The gravity hall hadn't been used since the incident. But the field was still operational. The block still sat at the center, untouched, preserved, though no longer part of the official testing program. When the Varelians entered, they hesitated. Their ambient neurofields rippled in unison, a low, vibrating awe. Even their speech was softened. One adjusted his vocalizer before addressing him. "You are Cadet Elias Grant." Elias nodded. "Yes." "You lifted the core block. You walked through a hyper-compressed field. You rebalanced a gravitic surge zone without augmentation." "I did what I had to." The neuralist stepped forward. "We've studied your physiology, your vitals, your data. But there is one thing we still do not understand." Elias waited. The neuralist tilted his head. "What taught you to do this?" It was a simple question, honest. And Elias thought about it for a long moment. He walked to the block, not to lift it, not to touch it, just to stand beside it, one hand resting on its edge. His voice was calm. "My great-grandfather mined iron without machines. He used his hands, his back, a pickaxe, and a cart he built himself. He cracked rock for 12 hours a day, not because it was glorious, because there was no one else to do it." He looked at them. "My mother raised 3 kids while hauling water up a frozen hill every winter. My uncle worked in 1.2 gravity fields because the pay was better, and it left his knees swollen for the rest of his life." The chamber was quiet. "I didn't learn this from a textbook. I learned it by watching the people around me refuse to stop, not because they weren't hurting, but because stopping didn't help." One of the ambassadors stepped closer. "You were shaped by hardship." Elias nodded once. "Yes, but that's not what made us strong." The ambassador blinked. "Then what did?" Elias turned, hand still on the block. "We stopped expecting the world to make things easier." After they left, he stayed behind. Not for training, not for glory. Just to sit on the platform, legs folded, hands resting on his knees. For a while, the hall was quiet. Then a sound echoed through the doorway. "Boots?" A familiar voice followed. "I heard you finally said something philosophical." It was Tamsin Hale, another Earthborn, not from the mountains like Elias, but from the western plains, where the wind wore you down more than weight did. She was the only other cadet who didn't flinch around him, who never asked about the lift. She sat beside him without being invited. "You're leaving soon," she said. He nodded. "Orders came this morning. Field deployment, outer ring." "Dangerous?" "Probably." She picked up a piece of chalk from the floor, a remnant from the training lines, and began drawing on the tile. A crude shape, a star above a small curve. Gravity lines, directional pull. Then, underneath, she scrawled 3 words. "Sky goes up." Elias raised an eyebrow. She grinned. "Just a reminder, not every force that pulls is trying to crush you." He looked down at the drawing, then at the ceiling, where the Academy's structural dome curved gently into a projection of stars. "I'll keep that in mind." Graduation came and went. He walked across the stage like everyone else, accepted the insignia, saluted the commandant, shook hands with those who'd once doubted him. There were no extra accolades, no special honors. But the room was full. Even the instructors who usually left after their own cadets had walked stayed until the end, not for the ritual, for him. As he stepped down, someone in the back row stood. Then, another. And another. No clapping, no sound. Just gravity. Holding them all still. Elias left the academy the same way he'd entered it. Quietly. One bag. No fanfare. He passed through the gate without pause, heading to an outpost no one else had requested, a rim-world installation orbiting a Class G planet with known tectonic instability and variable mass zones. He'd asked for it specifically. When the deployment officer asked why, he said only this: "I don't want to be somewhere easy. I want to be somewhere that needs someone who won't back down." The gravitic block remains in the Academy Museum. Visitors walk past it every cycle. Some stop, most don't. The ones who do linger always ask the same question. How? How could a human lift it when no one else could? There are many theories. Biomechanics, muscle density, joint resilience. But the instructors don't give the real answer in lectures. Instead, they point to the plaque beneath the block. The same 3 words scrawled in chalk that day. Sky goes up. And beneath it, a line added by someone long after Elias was gone. To those who carried what others couldn't, not because they were stronger, but because they kept walking. The cadets don't always understand it at first. But those who last, those who endure, always do. Because the lesson was never about lifting the block. It was about never dropping it. Not when it gets heavy. Not when it cracks the ground. Not even when no one's watching. That was the day the galaxy learned. Humans didn't defy gravity. They came from it. And they carried it with them. Always.